a needle in my mouth here. I can help you see. I hope this fits in the frame. Okay, hi guys. I know there are 1,000,001 how I sew my point shoe videos on YouTube. And I guess that's as good of an excuse as any for me to do one too. So here I'm kind of showing you all the stuff I use to sew, and also just like my point shoe survival bag here. So I have a couple pairs of scissors. These are the shoes we're gonna do today. I'm gonna show you how to put ribbons on, even though I usually don't do ribbons if I'm not going on stage, but they're gonna help me with some twisting that I've been dealing with. So I'll put those on for you today. And then I have some elastic. I have some mixed elastic here. It's because I only get this much when I order these shoes to do once across the ankle, and I have the kind of foot shape I need to have the X across. So I think what I'll do, what I've done on another pair of shoes is I'll split this in half. So one shoe will have a piece of solid ribbon and then a piece of invisible ribbon. If these were going on stage, I would try to get my ribbons better matched, but these are just going to be shoes for practice. I use floss, dental floss, unflavored and waxed. I have used minty floss before, and it just kind of made the sewing process a little nicer. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually throw my needle down in there, and this is a complete sewing kit, cutting the string on this little thing. So it's nice to have actual scissors that will give it a really clean cut. I have a very sharp needle, but the eye isn't too small. It's really, really sharp, and that especially helps when your hands start to get sweaty, or if you're doing gainer mindens, which have a thicker inner lining. And speaking of sweaty hands, this is a chunk of TheraBand that I just cut into a little square, and when your hands start getting too moist, you can pinch the needle with this, and it gives you the grip you need. And I got that from somebody on YouTube was doing that. This is just a little razor. I use this to cut the bottom off here, and I haven't been doing it recently. What I used to do, I'll just have to decide if I'm going to do it on these or not, is I would cut a circle of satin off the bottom, and then I would darn the raw edge. They're Sew Dances, and they have started having makers with these unique stamps. I wasn't seeing this before. So this is a little kangaroo, a horse maker, and I have 2 fish makers, so it's cool that they've been doing that. Finishing your ribbons. I'll figure it out in a second. I'm not left-handed. I douse my pads and my little squishy toe spacers in baby powder, and that just helps with smell and bacteria and keeps them from tearing. And I have a small one, and then I have a giant one at home, and then this is Tiger Balm. I couldn't find the red stuff that's really powerful, but this is still pretty good. Wow, sorry the light in here is so bad. My camera cannot focus. Any of the ballet classes I've made in this room are just really blurry. This is good for really anything that aches. I do remember one time I had a performance and I had a blister that just burst and turned into a lesion. And don't do this, but I just covered the whole toe in Tiger Balm, taped it, and crammed my foot in there and got through the performance. But I don't suggest doing that. This is really good for after class. Just kind of helps chill things down. Oh, it's a seam ripper. It has a cap. I like to cut old ribbons and old elastic off of shoes. I might even have some, yeah, these are some cannibalized ribbons. And then I just kind of have to pick my threads out. We're not going to do that today. I'm going to use new ones. I have an extra lighter, and then I also teach ballet, and a lot of times I cut the drawstrings off the little girls' shoes for them, or when I cut them off of point shoes, and I'll turn them into hair elastics. So this is like an on-the-go, like, forgot my hair elastic. Oh, just tie some old drawstring together, and I actually have a bunch of those. Okay, so let's get on to the sewing part of this. Not pulling ribbons or elastics off old shoes, so I'm going to get rid of this. We're not dancing right now, so these are going to go in here, and I'll get to this stuff a little bit later. I'm going to pick my left and right. This is going to be my left shoe, so just as I'm sewing, so I can remember, I'm going to scratch a little L into it with my scissors. So this is the left, which means this is the inside. So don't do this. unless you have a pair of shoes that you're willing to experiment on, but this is something that has been helping me with my twisting lately. I'm going to cut a line right here. And I know some people, they'll just sew, they won't bother to cut the fabric, but it's just easier for me to sew if I actually cut it. So I'm just going to make a little snip. I do this to lower just the inside of the shoe, and I'll kind of show you. It's mostly on my right foot, but I'll show you what that is all about. How I thread a needle. I have just down in here a needle hanging out, massive. So I can't use this needle. It's way too big. It's not going to be sharp enough, but I'll show you how I do it. You can just cut with this blade, but it kind of gives you a raggedy edge, which is hard to get through the eye of the needle. So you give it a clean edge. I just put it in my mouth, kind of clean it off. Okay, it's still got a little raggedy thing on it, but this is a huge eye too. And guys, I don't have a shortcut for this. I've just been sewing by hand since I was little, and it just takes practice getting a needle and thread in. Like, you just have to practice. Maybe start with a big needle. Like, I can put my thumbnail in that. That's massive. It's double knot. So I'm going to pull the two ends together here. Oops. So you have the two ends of the floss. I always do this no matter what it is I'm sewing. Increases the number of stitches you need. So then I'm going to take this and I'm going to tie a nice big knot this way. Okay, and this is just finger agility. I had some students kind of freaking out about this. So kids are not learning how to sew. I just learned how to sew as a little kid. My mom had me fix some of my own things. Anyway, so you just tie a knot, and you can make this as, like, make it as big as you need to tie a knot, okay? Just get that through there, and then once you have that through the loop, you can guide it so it's at the end. And then the great thing about floss is it is so thick, you really only need that one knot. If you want, you can double it up. You just tie carefully to make sure the second knot overlaps the other, and then you've kind of got this feather on the end. It's okay to just trim that off, and then that should be enough to hold it inside your shoe. I reach inside, and it's kind of tricky, but I need to fold this little mouth closed this way. I'm going to pinch it on the inside. Just turn the heel inside out, not all the way, but just enough that now I've got that little mouth right there closed up. I just start at this end, and I'm going to go actually quite close to the opening, or to where the initial split is. Actually, I'm going to start on the heel side. So it just depends on how your hands are and how the fabric's laying, what's easier. So I start pretty close to the side, but then I'm going to drop down, and I'm just doing a whip stitch. A whip stitch just means around and around and around and around. I'm going to drop down a little bit deeper to pull that fabric tighter. I want less fabric showing on my foot on this side. And then anytime as you're stitching, see as I just pulled that through, and then I've got this loop here. Anytime for a little bit more strength or security, I can put my needle through that loop. So sometimes I'll do that every single stitch. Okay, now I'm just going to stitch down this line that I made, and it kind of needs constant adjusting. I'll constantly be going this way. So I'm starting to run out of thread, so what I'm going to do is loop back through my last stitch. I just slide the needle along there. It doesn't matter if I catch the canvas or not. And then I gave me a loop. I go through that loop, and that just makes sure that I have a knot there, and I'm going to cut and rethread. So you only ever want 2 strands of floss. Don't add extra strands when your floss splits. Okay. Got that. That's a double loop because I remember I double looped my, or I always double up my floss. So I'm going to bring that through, and there. Now we've securely started a new set of string, even though we're going down the same seam. Made it to the end of this little seam, nice and tight. and all that did was bring this profile down. So this side is just a little bit shorter than this side here. And then I did a nice couple of double knots right there, so that should be really secure. So I can cut that nice and close. Whenever I cut this off, I'm always just gonna tie it, just so I know it's ready, just out of habit. Because you'll get all set up and then you'll go to thread, and the thread your first stitch and it just pops out. So just always get in the habit of tying that off. If you don't like how long the tail got, you can just trim it off. I kind of already know where I need my elastic to be on my shoes. I need it way back deep in the heel over here, especially where I've lowered this profile. This is gonna have more of a tendency to pop off my heel. So I send an elastic way back here, and then I crisscross and I come up so it's right under the arch, so it's gonna pull up there. Sometimes I'll go from the outside. If I'm going on stage, I think this looks a little bit, it just doesn't look very good. But I've seen people perform with it this way, and that's fine. So that's what we're gonna do today. You can go from the inside in here. It's just harder to sew because you're dealing with the bend of the heel. This elastic is already measured to my foot. I've already worn it on a pair of shoes. 3/4 of an inch. So I'm gonna give it a little bit more and make it a little bit tighter. Almost 1.5 inches, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm gonna start with the bottom corner. Oh, actually, so here's a little trick to hide my knot. This is where I want the elastic to be. I'm gonna take the needle and go underneath the elastic. I hurt this hand recently, and that's why I keep doing this little twisty thing. It's like I've got a cramp in my palm, and it's really hard to pinch and pull, which is exactly what sewing is. Okay, so the knot of my elastic is gonna be facing, sorry, the knot is under the elastic, so that will be facing the shoe. And I'm just gonna go in and out. So now I'm sending the needle and the thread all the way through. We are now attached by a single stitch. So I'm gonna go back in, right next to where I did it, right where we went in. Try not to poke yourself. And see, I'm just opening that up. I can see, ooh, hopefully you can too. I can see exactly where I want my next needle to go in. I want it to go right next to that first entrance, and I want to go along the bottom of the elastic. It's not a whip stitch. This is just an in and out, in and out. Okay, here's my first stitch. I like to go across the bottom, and now I'm going to do a diagonal up to the side and go across the top. Across the bottom, and then the second line, I really hope this is focusing. Then the second line goes up in a diagonal, so now I'm going to go across the top under the drawstring casing. So now I've gone all the way across the top. I'm going to backtrack on myself just a little bit, just to give that right here where it's attached to the shoe, and I know there's going to be a lot of pressure, just to give that a little bit more backup. This might be way too many stitches, but I would rather do too many stitches than have an elastic pop off in a show or a rehearsal, or even just in class. It can mess up your class time. So here I am at the end, and I'm on the inside. I'm just going to choose one of my last stitches and slide the needle through. And that is the loop where I'm going to tie my final knot. And if you're in a pinch, like I was saying, you can pull this little blade up here and use it. It just gives you kind of a dirty end, which isn't a big deal inside the shoe, but when you're going to thread this, and scissors are just nice anyway. Now I know on me where my arch is, but I'll kind of show you really fast how I figured that out, where I want this back, the front ribbon to go. Okay, and I've been running around outside, so that's what all these little scabs and scars are on my feet. So I'm gonna pull this over, feels nice and secure. I want it to go right under where I want the arch of the shoe to pull up. So, and I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. I want about 1 inch past the drawstring casing to go inside my shoe here. And honestly, this could also go on the outside. To me, it looks like it's gonna go right along this seam right here. And I think for this shoe in this situation, the way this is feeling, I'm gonna have it go down the front like that. Needle ready. Don't put this anywhere weird. Sometimes I'll stick it in the couch and then I'll lose it. Same thing, I'm gonna go on the inside now though. I have my inch that I've kind of eyeballed, and then there's this seam. And this time I'm actually gonna start along the top. And I'm not gonna worry about hiding the knot on the end of this floss, because this is on the inside of the shoe. So I just go right here on the inside of the elastic and inside the shoe, just under the drawstring casing. Okay, so there's my Z, across, diagonal down, and across again. I used to go back up, so I would have an X inside of a box shape, and I even used to go down the sides as well, but I've kind of figured out I don't need quite that much stitching. I'm gonna take my needle, I thread it again through the last stitch that I made, and it's okay if it catches other parts of the elastic. This is just more securing the end. So shoes are gonna look a little funny because they're gonna have two different colors of elastic. Should cut it in half, just so they're equal. But then I'll measure and see if one needs to be shorter. So cutting these in half. Now let me measure, see if it's similar. The same. If this were a little longer, I can always trim some really easily. So here I go. I have only been able to use this ribbon since I started using these shoes, and that's been for less than a year, probably only about 6 months. So I've had to come up with a few different ways of sewing this invisible ribbon. At first, to me, it seemed like it was not very stable, not very strong, and that it would pop off, but I'm actually pretty impressed with it. I'm just gonna make sure that the two heel elastics are lined up. The solid elastic will hold the knot. Because of the holes in this one, it will not hold the knot. See how that just came right out? So what I'm actually gonna do is start with the shoe. Now I'm gonna pull the corner through that I want. Okay, now it's attached that way. And then I have to go back through, so it's kind of sewing this lattice shape that they have here. And then they have the solid, the thicker lines. Those are what you're gonna sew over for making it really stick on there. So this is my inside ribbon on the inside of this arch. I'm actually going to sew it a little bit more deeply in here to help pull this inside arch hard against my shoe. The ribbon is going to help with this later too, but like I said, I don't always put ribbon on, so I try to get as much work out of the elastic as possible. Elastics done on one shoe. I don't cut my drawstring until I've worn the shoes for a little while. So when I put the shoes on for the first time, I'll pull these just a little, and I will do a double, or I'll do kind of a bow that is easy to undo. So we're not going to deal with these quite yet. Next thing is ribbons. Normally I'm done at this point. I guess I'll show you really fast what I do here around the toe. Along the outside here. Under this little cut I've made, sometimes fingernails will do it. There we go. And I didn't go all the way around. I'm going to use my scissors on the part with the pleats. Be really careful. I have slit myself open a couple of different times, but I have yet to send myself to the ER. So that's kind of how that goes. Just going to pull that down, and then I snip right across the top here. So from here, I can actually also be done. But I can show you just a little bit with this. So I'll pick a corner, one of these pleated corners, and go in. And the pleats might start to kind of come apart, so you can use this sewing to keep them a little bit together. Also, the ribbon is going to start to fray, so just be really careful, really gentle, and really thorough with your stitching. Okay. And then again, I just do the whip stitch. That's just the loops around with a knot in between each one. So that would be one whip stitch, but before I go in again, I go through that little loop. I don't like to use a sewing machine on my elastics and ribbons because I feel like the hand stitching gives you more elasticity. Kind of like when you use a zigzag stitch on a sewing machine, you can have a little bit of give, or the loopers on a serger. They let the fabric seams still breathe in and out instead of being rigid. And I have yet to make that work using a sewing machine. So I just like to do it by hand. It kind of naturally gives it the little give and take, helps the ribbon and elastic and the floss all kind of breathe together as your shoe is moving. See, just then I had a seam or a stitch that didn't want to go all the way, and the floss, with a little extra tugging, the floss really helped to get through. But the floss now, is when that comes in contact with the floor, is going to be very slippery. So I'm going to need to gum this up or rosin it up or do something to get it dirty. Once it's dirty, it kind of sticks better to the floor. Let's do ribbon. What do we have? 2 pieces, one for each shoe. Okay, so I have only recently started leaving the ribbon in one piece, and I'm going to show you how I just left that blade out. Show you how I figure out where that's supposed to be. The way I like it tied inside my shoe, and how much I want for my end there. And then I just tie it. Don't even need the shoe for this. What we do want to do is note where the middle of the shoe, or where the middle of the ribbon is, here in the middle of the foot. So I'm labeling this as my left side. I'll show you that in a second. Since it bled through, I don't need to mark the other side, but if your pen didn't go through, you'll want to mark that. So I'm going to lay the L down, and I'm going to put it just behind the elastic here. So where this little line is here, I'm going to stitch deep right next to the sole into the shoe. And you can see here I'm going very deep right up against the sole. My shoe tends to twist this way. See if I can show that. So the shoe will twist this way. So I'll have a big chunk of fabric right over here, and my foot actually looks sickled when it's really just the shoe. So I've lowered this side, and then I'm going to pull it up using the ribbon, and I've got this elastic nice and deep down in here too. So pulling this way. I have a big job for this ribbon to do. So that's what it's going to need some extra stitches for. Make sure my ribbon goes underneath the elastic, so it's coming out from in between these two. So I'm going to make that really, really clear. It's coming out from here. Okay, and I'm just going to do a couple of little stitches. These do not need to be as strong. In fact, I don't want them to be as strong because I want the main pull to be from the sole, not up here. This is just going to be for looks, where I do a couple of stitches in the top, so there's not a gap between my foot or between the ribbon and the shoe, like 4 stitches there, so nothing big. So I'm going to go ahead and do across the top here and make that really, really strong. My hands are starting to get sweaty. I'm going to grab my TheraBand, and that just helps me grip the needle. And I'm also trying to push the needle through the side seam a little bit. I only have to do that once or twice, but that will help. So I've gone across. I'm going to go back just to make sure this is nice and strong. For this is done. Time to do a little bit of breaking in. So I try to very carefully find where the top of the arch is going to be. I really like a 3/4 shank. I think most people do. and find the arch. You can do this with the muscles of your feet, but sometimes it's nice to get it done with a shoe, with your hands. Okay. Not too much, more just adding flexibility. Okay, as I find where I want the demi to break. So I'm just gonna push the shoe in this way, getting a little bit more flexibility in the arch, but I'm helping myself out with the demi point here. It's done that to it. And so we kind of want this shape here. Okay, that's a lot though, so we're gonna leave that alone. Should be plenty. Okay, and then what I will do is I'm gonna put a lot of water right here just because I have little bony things that stick out on the sides. So I like to do a lot of water across the top here, where it's comfortable on my foot. And I tie it in just a bow. I won't tie it in a double knot and trim it. See, I can undo that knot. I think I did a video a while ago when in new shoes, and this is what they looked like because I hadn't quite figured out where I wanted the drawstring to be. Last thing is this little glue job with my little pen where I would put this glue. And what it does is it reinforces this section right here. I tend to start clawing my foot. You know what that looks like as the shoe starts to break down. So I'll kind of get that point that instead of happening up in my arch, it's just happening down in my toes. So reinforcing this section here keeps that from happening. I actually recently saved a pair of shoes, like rescued them from needing to be thrown away because I did that. Where I want my arch to be, and I actually make it quite large, down almost to the middle of my foot here. And then I'll cover all of this in glue. We'll make this more slippery. After it's dried, I'll kind of scuff it up, either on the floor or maybe with a titch of sandpaper or even the side of my scissors. This way. Just kind of scrape like that to get it rough. I'm gonna get the other one sewn and then I'll show you a little bit of the foot breaking in stuff that I do. Honestly, the best way to break in pointe shoes is to take a pointe class. And then this is the foot where a lot of twisting happens, and you can kind of see I've just got a weird shape over here. This is just my pinky metatarsal, and it just sticks out. So the reason I did all that sewing the way I did is an attempt to get the shoe to twist this way. So I actually almost want to be standing just to the outside of that heel. Now get a little more fitted to my foot. I might even go in and re-sew the elastics so they're a little bit tighter. I'm gonna give myself a little pointe class here. One other thing to kind of help with getting rid of that twist is, so I just will periodically reach down during class and put the shoe back where I want it and try and make sure that I'm standing close to the outside of that sole in the back. And then this lovely stretch that we do, you can do it both, I'll show you this way, both parallel, and you can also turn this foot out and get a stretch kind of up the side here. And I will kind of do that as well as this little tendu derriere stretch. Just really have to make sure the shoe breaks in the right place. Is pulling this way, trying to get more fabric here than I have on the outside, because I just have badly shaped feet. Here we go, gonna do a little bit of a pointe class.
Two échappé, one échappé, balance. One hand, two.
Okay, that's a short little pointe class. That was actually, I didn't show you all of it, but that was Catherine Morgan's advanced pointe class. You can find that really easily on YouTube. I've done it probably 20 times since things shut down for COVID-19, just here by myself, and it's getting easier, but it's still quite a challenge. You can see I'm all pasty and shiny and puffy from it. They feel a lot better now. They might not even need that water. I'll probably put a little bit on. And yeah, so I'm gonna put this glue on, like I talked about, in that space that I talked about, and that is gonna help just keep them really solid so that I don't end up doing the claw thing. Thanks for watching. I know I have a request out there. Someone wanted like cleansing video with like salts, like exfoliating, I guess is the word they used. So I don't want to do too much of that on the calluses on my toes. I need those. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't use toe pads. I like to have a smaller shoe that really hugs my foot, and I just have spacers because I have that second toe that's just too long, and so that's what my spacers are for. But I don't like to wear toe pads, so I need all those calluses around my feet. But I bet you I could do something to take care of my nasty dancer heels. So that video is potentially coming up. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Happy feasting, happy fasting, happy dancing. Stay safe and stay healthy.